2010 was a special and unique time that I'll never forget. During that year's Christmas Day is when I first got my hands on Call of Duty Black Ops for my PlayStation 3. In hindsight, while it may or may not have been a great idea to have 12-year-old me play a rated M for mature video game, it's not like it was the first rated M game I played and got hooked on, nor was I unfamiliar with media that had contained a plethora of action and unsettling imagery, no thanks to my dad exposing me to these things at an early age, while being careful enough to teach me how to distinguish reality from fiction. Admittedly, I was also tugged by the influence of peer pressure since the Call of Duty buzz continued to circulate around the schoolyard, more so than what I'd seen prior to Black Ops' release, both before and during late 2009 and early 2010, thus resulting in a replacement of other obsessions that previously circulated in both myself and fellow students alike. In retrospect, while I admittedly did not enjoy my first tries with Call of Duty with other friends that have since moved away prior to that peer pressure and the release of Black Ops, I hold a bit of gratitude for those initial tugs, since had it not been for that, I wouldn't have a certain angle of engagement and enjoyment that I have with Call of Duty today. And since I've been around the Call of Duty franchise long enough over the course of a decade, I've been able to observe how some roots of the original Black Ops had carried on throughout every single entry that Treyarch has released after that, Cold War included. Certain things that I've been able to note over the years as well were the phasing out of Xbox and PlayStation 1-month exclusivity for new paid DLC in favor of giving everyone on all platforms a free DLC content update at the same time. And as for the old console exclusivity formula, as of this moment in time, that still lives on through 1-year PlayStation exclusivity that spread through not only Infinity Ward's Modern Warfare a few years back, but now Black Ops Cold War also, for a zombies mode that Treyarch developed. As the Call of Duty franchise continued to pump out games year after year, continuing its tradition of swapping creative studios yearly, while maintaining a consistency with satisfying the corporate overlords. The occurrence that I knew was inevitable during my time on the PS3, playing Black Ops in its prime, came to be. Call of Duty Black Ops would be remembered as Black Ops 1, a new beginning that ignited the spark of a legacy that secured its place as both a favorite to gamers and one of the greatest Call of Duty entries to date. While the Black Ops franchise continued for better or for worse, though I'd argue that not everything was lost during those times, the developers responsible for carrying on the Black Ops IP to this very day, meanwhile, still look to that title as inspiration, wishing to aspire to the impact that it made during its prime for a brand new generation with access to new technologies representing themselves as a step forward in the evolution cycle of what I once knew and loved a decade ago. My initial excitement for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War was very slim. Hell, I'll even admit that I once thought the title was a stupid name both before and after it was officially revealed. Now yes, I gave credit to where credit was due. The engagement that the developers gave to Call of Duty fans, even going as far as to use Warzone as a means to have players literally dash towards the reveal trailer back in the summer of 2020, did admittedly contain some intrigue. But for me, I guess due to, putting it lightly here, a burnout I'd felt for Treyarch's entry since Black Ops 4, I couldn't really feel much at the time. I also need to give credit to the developers and other respective team members for all coming together during a very weird and frightening time as COVID-19 swept the world off its feet, rendering traditional in-person work impossible without risk, forcing them to instead improvise on how to continue Black Ops Cold War's production from home and finish in time for November 2020's release. Though I must confess that these same circumstances that the developers were able to overcome was initially a source of worry for me, also contributing to the absence of any initial excitement during the reveal, which was also preceded by supposed whispers of Raven Software and Sledgehammer Games not getting along, which resulted in having to bring Treyarch in to help with the project instead, giving them less time to complete a game. And while time went on and my excitement to play Black Ops Cold War exploded for reasons I was surprised to even comprehend, as Treyarch's Zombies team seemed to be a lot more prepared and focused this time around compared to the Black Ops 4 era, my interest for the campaign also surprisingly grew as I learned a few more things, giving me a newfound sense of curiosity. One was seeing Raven Software heading the project for Cold War's campaign, and me being curious to see how they'd handle it, and based on what I've gathered, the team at Raven seemed to claim that they were fans of the original Black Ops, which I think I can believe. The second thing that fed into my curiosity came from an early showcase of a cutscene titled Perseus briefing cinematic, giving myself and many fans out there a closer glimpse of the new Black Ops character, Russell Adler. To make it a long story short, when I first watched that cinematic after it was uploaded to the Call of Duty YouTube channel, back in August 2020, I walked away feeling eager to learn a bit more about the mysterious new CIA clandestine special officer character. And based off what else was being teased at the time, it seemed like there were more new characters to meet and learn about in this upcoming Black Ops entry. Now at this point, you may probably be wondering, alright, so you played Black Ops 1, but you haven't mentioned the 3 iconic characters sitting in the same room as Adler in this cutscene? Well, not to be disrespectful or anything, but it's certainly no Sam Worthington or James C. Burns, that's for sure.
What the hell are you talking about? You know who we are?
Every mission we go on is illegal.
Though, on the contrary, even if previous actors like Ed Harris also weren't returning, I actually kinda dug Piotr Michael's portrayal of Jason Hudson. For me, it fit just right with both the kind of character Hudson is and what Raven was going for. With this, in addition to further understanding where and when the story of Black Ops Cold War was taking place in, I will admit that the stories of Alex Mason, Frank Woods, and Jason Hudson, in my mind, peaked and concluded a long time ago, during Black Ops 2. While yes, admittedly, one of them had a conclusion that still somewhat makes me shiver even to this day, Black Ops Cold War placing us in the year 1981 as opposed to 1986 and 1989, gave the game and world perfect leeway to showcase these old characters I knew and loved from Black Ops 1 in their prime, while giving plenty of breathing room for a new cast to shine. While Modern Warfare 2019, more or less, rebooted the stories of Infinity Ward's iconic cast of campaign characters in their own right, Cold War promised to keep itself in line with the original Black Ops as a direct sequel. Ever since Black Ops 2 came out 9 years ago, I felt that the game's timeline jumped a bit too far ahead in my eyes, but I can mostly forgive it since I remember that game's campaign with a certain fondness, since it did good in its own right. Plus, this was an era when Call of Duty began to get experimental with a futuristic approach. To note as well, around 2017 was when demand skyrocketed for a return to form with boots on the ground gameplay, since people had enough with Call of Duty's futuristic phase, thus resulting in games like Sledgehammer's Call of Duty World War II. On top of that slow return to form, there was a certain appeal, as proven with Modern Warfare 2019 and Black Ops Cold War respectively, to starting over and shining the spotlight on old characters once again, while giving a different yet modern take on their stories and worlds, as the developers aim to respect their original roots in their efforts to make something new. Speaking of different takes, I need not forget that while I am engaging with a cast of characters and worldly elements, both old and new, in addition to the potential of political topics that may be sparked from this package, that this is still a linear first-person shooter play space. I, among many others, were able to get a taste of Cold War's gameplay through the Nowhere Left to Run showcase in September, while indulging in the fact that it contains gameplay that I'm all too familiar with on a COD FPS, showcasing it with the heavily modified Black Ops 3 engine, as opposed to Infinity Ward's new engine they used for Modern Warfare. What I saw was a bit crazy and maybe a little excessive. But hey, all in all, I think it looked a bit fun to play. There wasn't any way of knowing as to whether or not patting down money for this game would be worth it in the end. But regardless, just like years prior, I eventually did just that and once again prepared to take up arms in this virtual space, ready to uncover this epic global conspiracy that was promised to be engaged with within this brand new Black Ops campaign. Beginning our story in the Netherlands, beginning once again with a simple yet iconic spark of a lighter's flame surrounded by a black screen, similar to the intro of Black Ops 1's story in Cuba. CIA agents Russell Adler and Alex Mason respectively wait within a bar for Amsterdam's police chief, Hans Timmerman, while Frank Wood stands by in the bar's alleyway waiting for the two. Their targets? Arash Kadivar and Kazim Javadi. The reason? Holding hostages within an American embassy in Tehran, basing this within a real historical event remembered as the Iran hostage crisis. No thanks to Adler's implied past involvement with the police chief, Hans gives Mason, Adler, and Woods 15 minutes to apprehend the only available target, Kasim. 15 minutes to make their way through dozens of armed men, interrogate Kasim for answers on Arash's whereabouts, and get out before Amsterdam's police force can move in after their 15 minutes is up, while mirroring the nature of Black Ops 1's opening mission, starting off with a simple mission that turns into something bigger. This love letter to Black Ops 1, as Raven put it, has something additional introduced when you get your hands on Kasim that remains a constant as you make your way through this campaign: optional responses. And there's a little bit to choose from depending on what mood you're in. No matter what you choose to do with Kasim, and however you choose to respond to him, Nowhere Left to Run's second and more bombastic half starts to build up and develop as the team of 3 geared up and move into Turkey to get a Raj and Trap Zone airfield. This second half will ultimately pivot the rest of the game's story as a missed sniper shot hits another armed goon instead of a Raj. A really crazy action sequence ensues, with an RCXD car denying the plane with a Raj on it to take off, exploding while still on the runway, and Woods miraculously pulling a Raj out of the wreck. And that missed shot that Mason took minutes prior turned out to be a blessing in disguise, since dead men tell no tales, and certainly not a soon-to-be dead man, about a certain Soviet agent supposedly planning to carry out an attack on the West. So from here on out, we've got a name and a seemingly mysterious antagonist lurking in the shadows: Perseus. But something else admittedly caught me by surprise. Truth be told, I thought throughout the game I'd be playing as Mason again, just like Black Ops 1. Turns out Cold War had other plans. Why not play as yourself, I guess? Then again, are you really yourself here? Well, as much as you want to be in a game that allows you to make your own character, with basic options here and there, based off what background check and personality traits you want. But, you know. Anyway, since we're not playing as Mason throughout the whole game, we're instead taking control of Bell. Supposedly, the story you've been plopped into in Black Ops Cold War is Bell has worked with Adler previously, back in Vietnam in 1968, and once again has come together with him alongside his recruited team members, Sims, Lazar, and Park, to hunt down Perseus. That being said, if Nowhere Left to Run's first and second half were all about introducing the game's simple dialogue mechanic and the taste of the bombastic action you're gonna expect to see throughout the rest of the campaign, the Safe House, while you can take a look around and have a chat or two with your fellow team members, and there are significantly interesting conversations to be had here and there, and conversations will vary depending on your response, the situation they're currently in, and sometimes even the background you choose to keep yourself immersed in your own story. We're also introduced to a pivotal support structure for the rest of the game: the evidence board. While you're able to browse through the intel and evidence that you've collected on throughout the story missions that you select and go on, it allows for a brush-up of the histories and backgrounds that Raven wrote regarding each situation and mission you've taken or are about to take. On top of that as well, they are essential pieces of the puzzle if you wish to go on 2 additional side missions that the campaign offers you. Now yes, you can do the side missions immediately, but there's an implication of what will happen and what will be left untouched in the world if you don't crack the evidence that you found on missions essential for Operation Chaos and Operation Red Circus. While it's only implied, in my reaction to the feeling of what's happening in the world of Black Ops Cold War is limited to that implication only, it's a nice little eureka moment to find out that the bits of brain work you did to crack the codes, the audio files, reading clues, crunching down the numbers, was something you were able to figure out. As for the side missions themselves, and their nearly repeated formulas of mowing down enemies, taking down the target, and taking a photograph, they're alright. As the hunt for Perseus continues and more obtained pieces of the puzzle are pinned to the evidence board, but not before a little bit of quarreling ensues here and there among allies due to admitted information that they previously weren't happy to have held back from them, such as Hudson having an American nuclear bomb stolen under his watch as he was responsible for a secret Soviet countermeasure program in Europe called Operation Greenlight, which also happened to be the same nuke that Bell discovered to be in their enemy's possession. There's a little more of a mix-up to keep things interesting here and there in the story missions, from the ones where you go in guns a-blazing, to sneaking around in dark alleyways, maintaining stealth, and surprisingly enough, a little more brain work, variety, and nostalgia. If you know, then you know. And there's plenty more to go around as well.
Great! You're gonna love my meat inside you! Your choice is meat or meat.
Talking specifics here, while I very much appreciated infiltrating new locations, having new moments with older characters, and also learning my lesson from my first playthrough at the cost of making certain choices as I made sure not to make the same mistakes again, As a Black Ops 1 fan, it was a sight to behold to return to Mount Yamantau, to the same relay dish that, in that game, Hudson and Weaver infiltrated in an attempt to reach Dr. Friedrich Steiner to stop Dragovich's Nova 6 sleeper agent plan. In terms of impact that it had on me, it's almost like that sequence in Blood of the Dead in Black Ops 4, returning to the spawn room that other Zombies players would remember from Mob of the Dead in Black Ops 2, in a, wow, we're back here again and it's still here after all this time kind of feeling. Funny enough, since Mason and Woods are the ones who infiltrate Yamantau, they may be 13 years late to a party that Hudson and Weaver kicked off, but it's nice to see them visit this location since they were unable to at the time due to the circumstances they found themselves back in Vietnam thanks to Dragovich and Kravchenko's, generous accommodations that they had for them. Speaking of generosity, what comes next after Yamantau is the highlight of the game that I'm sure many have spoken out about: Desperate Measures. While the task seemingly doesn't sound too difficult, this is the mission where, as the Russian you met in the beginning of the Yamantau mission, Belikov has many options at his disposal to obtain a bunker keycard for Adler and Bell to infiltrate the KGB in search of the names of sleeper agents that Dragovich had, thanks to Perseus erasing them from the Yamantau mainframe. Hudson was initially against this, but in retrospect, Adler and Bell were probably better suited for the mission instead of Adler going in with either Mason or Woods, like Hudson would have preferred. It was probably for the best considering if Mason and Woods went in there and saw a certain somebody, one would have probably recognized the other. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if Mason's programming would have started kicking in again, no thanks to it still being in his mind after all these years from Reznov's intervention of Dragovich's original programming, intending for Mason to kill President John F. Kennedy, altering it to target Dragovich, Kravchenko, and Steiner instead. But I digress. I don't think I've done every single option, but the ones that I've been able to complete have been interesting. I know that whenever I get to this mission, instead of following a set path as I shoot through the enemies like I did the last playthrough, I brace myself for the fact that I can switch up tactics and do things drastically more different than I did before, if I wanted, while ensuring that I don't blow Belikov's cover as I give a new option a try. On top of all this variety as well, is a surprise that I'm sure everyone reacted to differently, some more excited than others. While I'm not versed in what happens in Warzone, it was semi-cool to have Zakhaev present as a way of communicating to players of this game's connection with Modern Warfare 2019, despite both games taking place 3 to 4 decades apart from one another. But as I've stated, I'm not entirely versed in Warzone lore, but it's there to maintain that connection and bridging the gap, and it's there for those that want to indulge. Anyway, from this point on, after Adler and Bell are able to force their way out of the KGB with Belikov, Dragovich's sleeper agent names in hand, this final stop at the safe house we've been in throughout the entirety of the campaign is the last opportunity to do any side missions, if you haven't completed them already, to put it in Adler's words.
Team, wrap up any unfinished business. Once we strike, there's no turning back.
Now, despite working alongside these characters for quite a while, as a player in your Bell's shoes, you may, or may not, have wondered if something is off, and yet, there's always been an itching suspicion that things aren't what they're meant to be. And while it isn't immediate, those questions that have come about as to why those itching suspicions even started to flutter in the first place slowly come into fruition as we continue to make haste, as we charge right into the end of the line. Up to this point, the characters understand what's at stake regarding the green light nuke in Perseus's possession, and no thanks to Bell and Adler's successful retrieval of the list of sleeper agent names from the KGB, they've been able to track their whereabouts to Cuba, where they'd hoped to get the nuke back and get out. Upon infiltrating and gunning through the complex in Cuba, as the team seemingly just misses their adversary Perseus, things continue to thicken as another thing prompts their attention to a dying Theodore Hastings. One nuclear bomb left behind? Not a problem for Perseus anymore. Turns out he's got every nuclear bomb under the Operation Greenlight umbrella posted around Europe, and unfortunately for Hastings, last regretful act was to forcefully reverse engineer the detonation codes for Perseus. To add on to this as well, as the player's choice starts to kick back in once more, when getting to this particular sequence for the first time as I watched Lazar and Park lay injured and unable to move, there was a familiar and dreading feeling of, oh no, not again. First Polanski and Robach, now them. And in this moment, just like that final American mission in Call of Duty World at War, you have to act quickly to save the one you want, otherwise, in Cold War's case, you'll end up saving nobody. After Cuba, regardless of the choice you made between Park and Lazar, at this point, they have all been stretched thin, all rational options seemingly swept off the table. When Hudson believed they had no more options, Adler was ready to push one last desperate and crazy solution onto the table, Bell themselves. And similar to Desperate Measures, but in a Stanley Parable kind of way, Adler commands and walks you through what you need to do within these memories of Vietnam that he's making you brush up on again, albeit drug-induced this time. There is leniency in the way you walk through this mission, whether your actions are approved of Adler's script, or if Bell completely wanders off script, resulting in very trippy and seemingly scary things to occur as the drugs begin to warp their mind in utter confusion. And while your freedom cannot last forever, as Adler can become quite aggressive in his persuasion, there is, however, another form of resistance nipping at Bell's mind. As if the suspicions that were previously gnawing at you, the curtain slowly starts to pull back, and some light is shined on the real truth of who Bell really is. An MI6 agent royal to the crown, former KGB that worked for the Reds, CIA agent, Vietnam veteran who shared the hell out of that war with Adler and Sims. Sadly, it turns out that Bell was none of those things from the start. And this is where both nostalgia and the Black Ops 1 love letter that Raven Software kept talking about really kicks in again. Back in Black Ops 1, after Mason's respective interrogations to uncover the meanings of Dragovich's numbers broadcast, Mason had always remembered Viktor Reznov present with him after his escape from Vorkuta, be it Khe-Sanh, continued SOG operations in Vietnam, or Rebirth Island. With Reznov revealed to really be dead since Vorkuta by Hudson all that time ago, Mason only had his memories cleaned up and altered after accepting the truth that Reznov was never there with him. Mason was truly there for all the events, but Bell? Turns out he'd been programmed and brainwashed to believe he shared history with Adler, but they were never truly present with them in Vietnam, since they were implanted memories given to Bell based off of Adler and Sims' missions. And as for who Bell was before they became Adler's protege, well, it turns out they've been there since the beginning of the end, with the situation detailing Arash's apprehension all the way back in Trap Zone Airfield, just before Mason, Woods, and Adler moved in to do their part in taking out Arash, playing their part as a close associate to Perseus. And if you've ever wondered whose chest the M1911 bullet was extracted from at Trap Zone, or why Hudson was very distrustful around Bell, well, there you go. With Bell being left for dead on the airstrip, that's when Adler took him away, along with the dossier they claimed for Bell to have found in Vietnam. With the CIA's interrogation attempts proving to be fruitless, there was one solution Adler advocated for, despite the dangers Park warned Adler about, for the sake of the individual who would become Bell, brainwashing using MK Ultra's research to make them believe they were someone else. And to keep Bell in line, Adler had his "we got a job to do" command phrase he's always spun around, and the rest of the team all got immersed with Bell's made-up past, which also speaks to the unique way that a player could experience this campaign based on the background they initially chose, with the truth finally revealed, and Bell finally realizing that they've been lied to, and what's at stake with the Greenlight nuclear arsenal in Europe. They had a couple choices to make, a choice that you, the player, would ultimately have to make the call for. On one end, you could say, fuck Adler, fuck saving the world, let's gear up and get evil so I can go back to where I actually belong and do what I'm meant to do. In that case, you would choose to tell Adler that Perseus is in Duga, deriving from the default canonical option of choosing Solovetsky. Things get quite bloody in an indulging kind of way as you switch out an XM4 with an AK, which Perseus themselves will congratulate you on, as your loyalty was always strong, and this entire ordeal was a test to the strength of said loyalty. But on the other hand, potentially reading into what Bell would think about when choosing to tell the truth. They might assume that due to Arash betraying them, on top of Perseus ensuring that they be silenced, as Volkov even tried to have them killed in Berlin, maybe it'd bring up a question of, does Perseus really care about me? Adler and the team did give me a second chance to live after all. Also, there's millions of lives at stake if nothing is done about Perseus. It's not indulging in an evil kind of way, though the same track, Final Retribution, is used in both the Duga and Solovetsky endings, which kinda makes charging into the monastery base with Adler and a large group of American soldiers all the more frantic, especially when you're able to pick up a minigun and hose down anyone still defending Perseus' goals, some even attempting to run away from the fight as Bell and the Americans close in and finish things off. So, everything's now been set right. Perseus' plan in ruins, Mason and Woods being alive so they can keep their place in Black Ops 2's timeline, and depending on what you did during the campaign, will be further blows to Perseus' operations, if you've done the time to do them. Bell is a hero, in Adler's perspective, sacrificing a lot to do what had to be done in order to save Europe and even protect America's reputation, despite the shady secret things that certain characters have done. Hero is quite the funny word for Adler to use. At this point, maybe Bell could have thought, maybe I could begin a brand new life, or continue to hunt down the scattered and broken Perseus and his operations with Adler and the CIA. Oh, so that's how it's gonna be, huh? All in all, despite me previously fearing of this game's production due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the campaign actually kinda surprised me, and Raven put together something quite solid, despite the limitations in production and working on Cold War from home. The way that Raven kept citing over and over again regarding Cold War's campaign being a love letter to Black Ops 1 results in a campaign that admittedly has a formula and story I've seen before, but that didn't detract from the enjoyment I got out of this game's campaign, and I think this will be quite the memorable thing to look back on and think about when I think back to the 2020 pandemic. The new cast of characters like Adler mixing in with characters of the past was a great treat, and the twist at the end with Bell was admittedly pretty good and had me hooked as I appreciated on where the story was going from start to finish. Sure, it wasn't as grounded or in some cases shocking or surprising as Modern Warfare 2019, but I think embracing the craziness that Black Ops is known for was a perfect move. And if anyone at Raven Software has been watching up to this point, I really appreciate the work you all did in making this campaign happen, despite the struggles I can only imagine you endured with adapting to the working from home situation along with adapting to development on new gen hardware. I'd say you guys did pretty good, so again, thank you for the work you did. It meant a lot to me as somebody whose first Call of Duty I'd owned was Black Ops 1. And with that, we finally come to the end of the video. If you've gotten up to this point and are still around despite my 7-month plus absence, I really appreciate you for sticking around. As for why I've been away for so long, and I truly apologize for being away all this time, but truth be told, not only did my efforts on the Gravity Rush 2 review I worked on all the way back from late 2020 and finished in early 2021 knock the wind out of my sails, though I'm still very proud of how that video turned out, but I was also in the process of completing my university degree course requirements. In addition to not really having the time to finish this review that I thought would be a simple task, the project, to my dismay, got held back, and I had to make sure to prioritize what was important in my life. But I'm happy to say that I did complete all of my university requirements, and I should be receiving my degree this fall, meaning that this will be my first fall in my life where I'm not going to have to go to school anymore, which I think will be a little weird to adapt to at first, but I'll hopefully figure things out. I'm also trying to prepare some more content slowly in the works. While I do still feel a little bit of passion towards certain projects, there are others that I admittedly want to work on more at the moment, and I'm trying to prepare ahead of time for my future content too. I may need to balance time between going back to work, but now that this review is done and school is no longer on my mind, I can finally dive in and get to those projects that I've been eager to get to for some time. As for anything else related to Call of Duty on my channel, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of respect for the developers behind this game, but I remain uncertain at the moment for covering anything related to Call of Duty 2021, or if I'm picking it up this year, but let me know if I should or not. Though for now, I might just wait until launch to see what people think. Also, I may return to Black Ops Cold War one more time in the future to discuss one last thing. But until those days come to pass, if you like what you've seen throughout this video and want to see more, I have a couple playlists that contain my other reviews that I've done in the past. And if you'd like to stick around for future content and want to support my future endeavors, subscribe to the channel and check out my Patreon that I've recently relaunched ahead of finally completing this video. And like I said, I got a few projects that I'm working on, so if stuff like early showcases of those projects is what you're interested in, along with other things like access to a Discord server where you can discuss things with both myself and fellow viewers and patrons, then consider checking it out to support me. I want to try to work hard to potentially make YouTube another means to support myself, and who knows, maybe by the time I'm ready to release another video, I'll have some names at the end and some people to shout out. So with all that being said, Thank you for tuning in and for considering what I've had to say. I'll see you in any other future project that I release. Take care for now, and farewell.